Welcome to lesson 107. Today we're going to talk about slope. When we talk about slope, we're usually either looking at an equation of a line or looking at a line itself. So what is slope? Slope is actually the number that represents the slant of the graph of a linear equation. So the slant, so how steep the line travels. Is it traveling almost vertical? Is it traveling more at a 30-degree angle? So we're looking at the number that represents that slant of the graph of a linear equation. So a linear equation is just an equation that when I plot the points, I come up with a line. So to start off with slope, what I have here is I have two lines drawn on my graph. Okay, and what we like to do is we like to suppose that we have a little car that's over here. And when the car travels from the left and it hits the line, if that car is going to travel up, we're going to have a positive slope. So this light colored line right here would represent a positive slope because the car comes along, it hits it, and it goes up. Okay, so that's when a slope is positive. A slope is negative if the car hits the line and then the car ends up traveling down. So on this example, this darker line here, if the car comes along, hits this line, then it's going to start traveling down. So that darker line would have what we call a negative slope. So the car travels up, positive slope. The car travels down is a negative slope. Now, when we talk about the slope, we have what's called the magnitude of the slope. That's also known as the absolute value of the slope. So it's a number, but it doesn't have a positive or negative sign. It's just absolute value. So the magnitude of the slope is defined to be the ratio, think fraction, of the absolute value of the change in the y-coordinate to the absolute value of the change in the x-coordinate as we move from one point on the line to another point on the line. So the way that we can write this, okay, we have the slope, the change in y, absolute value, over the change in x, and that will give us the absolute value of the slope. So what is the change in y? The change in y is what we call the rise. The change in x is what we call the run. Okay, so let's just take a look at what this would mean. Okay, the change in y. So we're looking at the y-axis. The change in x is going to be the x-axis. So how am I going to find the slope of a line taking a look at the change in y over the change in x? Okay, so a couple of things I have to remember. Okay, the slope has a sign and it has a magnitude. Okay, so let's start with the sign. If my little car is traveling and it hits this line, it's going to go up. So in this particular line, the sign of the slope is going to be positive because we travel up. So the sign is going to be positive because our little car is going to travel up. So now we have to look at the magnitude. Remember, this is the absolute value of the change in y over the absolute value of the change in x. So the way that I like to do this is I like to draw myself a little triangle. So I look at, well, here's a point where we're crossing at an intersection, where this line crosses at an intersection. Here's another point where this line crosses at an intersection. I could have chosen any 2 points. Those two just stuck out to me, but we like to choose where they cross at an intersection. Okay, and then from those 2 points, I'm going to make sure I have a triangle that's drawn. So here's one side of the triangle, here's another side of the triangle, and here's the third side of the triangle. Okay, so then let's look at the change in y. Sorry, my dog is helping me do my math videos. So let's do the change in y. So y is up and down. So let's see, how many did I go up? 1, 2. So that is my y. Over left and right. How far did I go? I went one spot. So that is my change in x. So here's the x. Remember, x is going to be left and right. Y is going to be up and down. Okay, so let's look at what I have for the slope. Okay, so I have a positive, and then I have a 2 over 1. Well, what is 2 over 1? It's 2. So the slope of this line is a 2. Now, strangely enough, we use a lowercase m to mean slope. So m equals 2, or slope equals 2. So now that we know how to find the slope of a line, we're going to learn to write the equation of a line. So to write the equation of a line, we need to know, 1, the value of what is called the intercept, b. So literally that means where is that line crossing the y-axis, okay? We need to know the sign of the slope, and we need to know the magnitude or absolute value of the slope. So it says find the equation of this line. Okay, the general equation before we add any values, it's y equals mx plus b. Okay, we just talked about that m means the slope. The y is going to stay the same, so y equals, then we'll put our slope here, and then we'll have an x, plus where does that line cross the y-axis, or we call that the y-intercept of that line. So first thing, let's find the slope. Okay, so I'm going to look first at the sign of the slope. So my little car comes along, hits this line, and we go down. So that means my slope is going to be negative. So I know so far I have y equals negative something. Let's find out what it is. So to find the slope, I'm going to look for 2 points where it is crossing or intercepting. Okay, it looks like here's a good point. Here's another good point where it is crossing at an intersection. Okay, so I'm going to draw my triangle. I already know this is part of my triangle. So there's part. And there's part. Now I have a full triangle. Okay, so remember, it's the change in y. So let's see up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 over the change in x, left and right, 1, 2, 3. So 4/3 is the magnitude of my slope. I know that it's a negative slope, so I've got the slope part done. So y equals negative 4/3. I'll put my x. Okay, now I have plus b. Remember, b is that y-intercept. So where is this line crossing the y-axis? It's crossing right here, which is at the 5. So, and it's at a positive 5. Okay, so my y-intercept, or what we called the value of the intercept b, is going to be a 5. So in this equation where the b was, we insert a 5. So the equation of this line is y equals negative 4/3 x plus 5. Generally, with our slope, we do not change this into a mixed number. We leave it as an improper fraction. So this would be my final answer for the slope of that line. All right, so here's the last example we have from this lesson, and this just summarizes what we talked about. In what we call the slope-intercept form, the equation y equals mx plus b, we call the constant m the slope of the line. We know that that slope has both a sign and a magnitude, and then we also call this b the y-intercept. So again, find the equation of this line. So I'm going to start with the general equation, y equals mx plus b. My y stays the same. Slope, let's look first at the sign. My car comes up, hits the line, travels up, so my slope is positive. I can choose to put a positive sign or not put a positive sign. I generally don't put a positive sign because we understand it's going to be positive if there's no sign. So now I need to look at the magnitude. So I'm going to find some places where it crosses at an intersection. So this looks like a good place. Oh, here's another one. That looks like a good place. Okay, I'm going to complete my triangle. Now, I've been drawing the triangle on top of the line. Does it matter if I draw it on bottom of the line? It does not. Okay, either place I draw it is fine. Okay, so remember I'm doing the change in y over the change in x. So the change in y, up and down, we have a 1. The change in x, left and right, I have a 1 because it's 1 unit. So 1 over 1, x. So now all I need to do is find the y-intercept. Okay, so I go and look, where does this line cross the y-axis? Here, it crosses the y-axis at a positive 1. So I just add plus 1. Now, I do have 1 over 1 here. I would simplify that, and I could say y equals 1x plus 1. Or I could write it y equals x plus 1. Either of those mean the same thing, but there is the equation of my line. All right, have a great time working on your lesson.